The paper was pink. Not a soft, friendly baby shower pink. It was a neon, radioactive, hazardous materials pink that screamed, "You screwed up," before you even read the text. It was taped to my front door with blue painter's tape, which was ironic, considering using the wrong color tape was probably also a violation in this neighborhood. I stood there in my bathrobe, shivering in the biting January wind, staring at the slip. My breath plumed out in little gray clouds as I snatched the paper off the wood. Notice of violation. Date: January 2nd. Time: 07:00 a.m. Infraction: unauthorized holiday. Clutter: seasonal decor beyond permitted dates. Fine: $500. I rubbed my eyes. I hadn't even had coffee yet. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, casting long, cold shadows across the manicured lawns of the Whispering Pines gated community. I looked at my watch. It was 7:15 a.m. $500? I muttered to the sleeping neighborhood. For being 2 days into the new year? I looked out at my lawn. Okay, to be fair, clutter was Brenda's word. I preferred masterpiece. I had gone hard this year. I'm talking about a 12-foot inflatable snowman that waved a mechanized hand, a brigade of 20 plastic nutcrackers lining the driveway like a royal guard, and enough LED string lights to guide a commercial airliner to a safe landing on my roof. It was magnificent. It was joyful. It was also, apparently, illegal as of 7 hours and 15 minutes ago. I heard the sound before I saw it. It was a high-pitched, electric whine, like a mosquito the size of a Buick. I groaned. I knew that sound. It was the sound of authority. It was the sound of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association patrol vehicle. A white customized golf cart, street legal, enclosed with plastic sheeting to protect the driver from the elements, crept around the corner. On the side, in gold leaf lettering that probably cost more than my first car, it read, "Whispering Pines Compliance." The cart slowed as it approached my driveway. The brakes squeaked. The driver's side plastic flap unzipped with a tearing sound that grated on my hangover. And there she was. Brenda. Brenda was the president of the HOA, a position she held with the sort of terrifying absolutism usually reserved for 18th century French monarchs. She wore a puffy white vest over a beige turtleneck, and her hair was a helmet of blonde spray-stiffened armor that defied wind, gravity, and reason. "Good morning, Jack," she chirped. She didn't sound like she meant it. She sounded like she was marking social interaction off a checklist. "Brenda," I said, holding up the pink slip. "It's January 2nd. "I know," she beamed, adjusting her rimless glasses. "Happy New Year. Did you get the citation?" "I'm holding it, Brenda. It's $500. "Standard fee for a Class B infraction," she said, tapping a pen against her steering wheel. "Holiday decorations must be removed by 12:01 a.m. on the 2nd day of January. It's in the CC&Rs. Section 14, Paragraph C, Subsection 2. 12:01 a.m.? I stepped off the porch, my slippers crunching on the frost-covered grass. "Brenda, that was 7 hours ago. Most people were sleeping off the champagne." "Rules are the glue of society, Jack," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. She looked past me, scanning my yard with a look of genuine disgust. She pointed the pen at my nativity scene. "And honestly, the wise men are crowding the sidewalk. That's an ADA liability." "The wise men are 5 feet back from the curb," I argued, shivering now. "Look, Brenda, cut me some slack. I've got the flu. I woke up yesterday with a fever of 102. I physically couldn't get out here to take this stuff down. It was a lie, mostly. I had a headache, sure, but mostly I had just been lazy and watching football. But she didn't need to know that. Brenda's smile vanished. She sighed, a long, disappointed sound, like a teacher realizing a student had eaten the paste. Jack, if I make an exception for your flu, I have to make an exception for the Miller's gout and the Henderson's bad back, and before you know it, Whispering Pines looks like a carnival until March. We have property values to maintain. It's not a carnival, I snapped. It's Christmas. It was Christmas, she corrected. Now it is January. Now it is Clutter. You have 24 hours to remove every bulb, every plastic figure, and that thing. She gestured vaguely at the inflatable Santa that was currently deflated and looking like a crime scene body bag on my lawn. If it's not gone by tomorrow morning at 7:00 a.m., the fine doubles, and it becomes daily. Daily? My voice went up an octave. Daily, she confirmed. She zipped up the plastic window. Feel better, Jack. Drink plenty of fluids. The electric cart whined back to life, and she trundled off down the street, hunting for unauthorized garden gnomes or mailboxes painted the wrong shade of beige. I stood there for a long time. The cold was seeping through my robe, but I didn't feel it anymore. I felt something else, a warm, burning sensation in the center of my chest. It wasn't the flu. It was spite. I looked at the pink slip in my hand. Then I looked at my house. The house was a standard 2-story colonial. Nice, safe, boring, but covered in the lights I had spent 3 weekends stapling to the fascia. It looked alive. I remembered the look on my nephew's face when he saw the synchronized light show on Christmas Eve. He had screamed with joy. Clutter, I whispered. I walked back inside, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I went into the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee. My wife, Sarah, was already gone for work, so it was just me and the silence of the house. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the citation. Section 14, Paragraph C. I had moved into Whispering Pines 3 years ago. I knew it was strict. I signed the papers. I agreed to the beige paint and the maximum grass height. But this felt personal. Brenda had been riding me for months. First about my trash cans being visible from the street. I moved them. Then about my truck being parked in the driveway instead of the garage. I cleaned out the garage. But messing with my Christmas lights? That was an attack on my soul. I took a sip of coffee and pulled my laptop toward me. Okay, Brenda, I muttered, opening a new browser tab. Let's see what Section 14 actually says. I logged into the resident portal. It was a clunky website that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2005. I downloaded the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, a 200-page PDF file that could cure insomnia. I hit Ctrl+F and searched for holiday. There it was. Holiday decorations. Temporary displays of a seasonal nature are permitted commencing 30 days prior to the recognized holiday and must be removed no later than 48 hours after the conclusion of the holiday. I read it again. Recognized holiday. I sat back. That was vague. Recognized by whom? The federal government? The state? Hallmark? I scrolled down. I was looking for a loophole. I needed a technicality. Maybe the definition of removal was loose. Maybe I could just unplug them? No, the text said remove. Then I scrolled past the holiday section and hit the section on exterior alterations. No permanent structures, statues, or signage may be erected without board approval. Standard stuff. I kept scrolling. I don't know what I was looking for, strictly speaking. I just knew that I wasn't going to go outside in the freezing cold and take down 5,000 lights just because Brenda had a power trip. Then I saw it. Section 22. Exceptions. Notwithstanding the foregoing, nothing in these covenants shall be construed to prohibit displays protected by state or federal law, including political signage, during election periods only, and religious displays, provided such displays do not constitute a safety hazard. I stopped. I blinked. Religious displays. I leaned closer to the screen. The Fair Housing Act. I remembered reading something about this on Reddit years ago. HOAs couldn't discriminate based on religion. They couldn't ban a mezuzah or a wreath or... I looked out the kitchen window at the deflated Santa on the lawn. Was Santa religious? Technically, St. Nicholas was a saint. A bishop. That was church stuff, right? But the inflatable snowman? Probably not. The nutcrackers? Definitely not. But the lights? Let there be light, I whispered. I needed a professional opinion. I wasn't going to fight Brenda with a Google search. I needed a shark. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Stan, lawyer. Stan wasn't a high-powered corporate attorney. Stan was a guy I went to college with who barely passed the bar and now ran a practice out of a converted Pizza Hut next to a dry cleaner. But Stan hated authority more than anyone I knew. I dialed. Law Office of Stanley Kowalski. We sue so you don't have to. Stan's voice rasped. He sounded like he was eating toast. Stan, it's Jack. Jack, my favorite engineer. Did you finally kill your boss? No. Worse. My HOA just fined me $500 for Christmas lights. Bastards, Stan said, the chewing stopping instantly. I hate HOAs. They're essentially localized tyrannies operating without oversight. What's the citation? Clutter. They want it down by tomorrow or the fine doubles. And you don't want to take it down. Stan, I spent 40 hours putting this stuff up. Also, I hate the president. She smirked at me. The smirk is legally actionable in my book, Stan said. Okay, send me the bylaws. I'll look at them. But usually they have you dead to rights on timelines. Unless what? Unless we can prove the timeline is discriminatory, Stan said. Are you Jewish? Can we claim it's Hanukkah? Wait, Hanukkah is over too. I'm nothing, really. I mean, raised Catholic, but I haven't been to Mass since the 90s. Pity. If you were Orthodox, we could argue the Gregorian calendar is oppressive. But wait. I heard typing on his end. Send me the bylaws. I'm looking at the federal statutes on religious expression in housing. If we can classify your display as an expression of a sincerely held religious belief, they can't put a time limit on your faith. You can't tell a church to take down its cross on January 2nd. Stan, I said, a slow grin spreading across my face. Are you saying my house is a church? I'm saying the definition of religion is surprisingly fluid in the United States legal system, Jack. Send the PDF. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. I hung up and emailed the file. 10 minutes later, I was standing by the window watching a neighbor, Mr. Henderson, sheepishly taking down his wreath. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had let the Brendas of the world win. My phone rang. Jack, Stan said. His voice was different now, excited. Do you have a printer? Yes. I'm sending you a document. Print it. Sign it. Laminate it if you can. Do you have a staple gun? I have a staple gun. Good. Go to the hardware store. Buy a spot of floodlight, a big one. And maybe a podium. Stan, what are we doing? We are founding a congregation, Jack. The bylaws in Whispering Pines are sloppy. They define religious displays, but they don't define religion. and they certainly don't define duration of worship. If you say those lights are essential to your spiritual practice, Brenda has to prove they aren't. And to do that, she has to drag you to court, which will cost the HOA thousands. What's the religion? I asked. I'm thinking, the Church of the Perpetual Illumination? No, too culty. How about the Order of the Everlasting Yule? The Order of the Everlasting Yule. I tested the words. They tasted like victory. What are the tenets? Light, Stan said. Joy, and the rejection of darkness, specifically the darkness of January. I love it. One catch, Jack. You can't half-ass this. If you say it's a religion, you have to treat it like one. No taking it down. Not in February, not in July. If you take it down, you admit it was seasonal. If it stays up, it's a shrine. For how long? A year, Stan said. The statute of limitations on the citation appeals is usually a year. If we keep it up for 365 days, we prove sincerely held belief. A year. I looked at the plastic Santa. I imagined him baking in the August sun. I imagined the HOA board meetings. I imagined Brenda's face. Send the document, I said. The rest of the day was a blur of manic activity. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, which, considering the flu lie I told Brenda, was just maintaining continuity. I went to the Home Depot 3 towns over just to avoid running into anyone I knew. I bought 4 industrial-grade outdoor floodlights. I bought heavy-duty zip ties. I bought a laminator. When I got home, I printed the letter Stan had drafted. It was beautiful. It was filled with words like constitutional right, ecclesiastical exemption, and litigation. I walked out to the mailbox. I taped the letter to the inside of the box door, facing outward, so the mailman and Brenda would see it. Then, I went to work on the display. I didn't take anything down. Instead, I reinforced it. The inflatable Santa had been tethered with flimsy nylon strings. I replaced them with braided steel cable. I hammered 18-inch rebar stakes into the half-frozen ground to anchor the nutcrackers. They weren't just decorations anymore. They were a fortification. By the time the sun went down, I was exhausted. My hands were raw, and my breath was steaming in the dropping temperature. But I was ready. At 5:30 p.m., the timers clicked. Chunk. The house exploded into light. It was glorious. 10,000 tiny bulbs blazed to life. The inflatable Santa inflated with a low, powerful hum, rising from the grass like a resurrected deity. The wise men glowed. The reindeer shimmered. I stood on the sidewalk, admiring the glow. A car slowed down as it passed. It was the Johnsons. Mrs. Johnson rolled down the window. "Jack?" she called out, looking confused. "Did you forget what day it is?" "Evening, Martha," I waved. "Just celebrating the season." "But it's over," she said. "Not for me," I yelled back cheerfully. "Not for the order." She rolled up her window and drove away quickly. I waited. I knew she would come. Brenda prowled these streets at night like a vampire seeking HOA violations. Sure enough, at 7 o'clock p.m., the whine of the electric motor cut through the crisp night air. I was sitting on the front porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, holding a mug of cocoa. I watched the white cart turn the corner. I saw the brake lights flare red as she saw my house. It must have looked like a supernova in a sea of darkness. She didn't just stop. She skidded. She hopped out of the cart, her clipboard already in hand. She marched up the driveway, her face a mask of righteous fury. The flashing red and green lights reflected in her glasses, making her look like a disco Terminator. "Jack!" she shrieked. "What is this?" "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I said calmly. "You added more." She pointed at the floodlights illuminating the roof. "This is defiant! This is willful non-compliance! I told you, Section 14… Actually, Brenda," I interrupted, standing up. "It's Section 22. She froze. "What?" "Exceptions," I said. I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out a laminated copy of Stan's letter. I handed it to her. "Please read this carefully." She snatched the paper. She squinted in the light of the glowing Santa. "To the Board of Whispering Pines," she read aloud, her voice trembling with rage. "Please be advised that this residence is now designated as a place of worship for the Order of the Everlasting Yule. The illuminated displays present on the property are not seasonal decor, but are, in fact, religious icons, central to the residents' spiritual practice." She stopped. She looked up at me. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. "You're joking." "I never joke about my faith, Brenda," I said solemnly. "The light keeps the darkness at bay. To remove it would be a sin." "There is no such thing as the Order of the Everlasting Yule," she spat. "You made this up." "That sounds like religious discrimination, Brenda," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Are you telling me my beliefs aren't valid? Because my lawyer, Mr. Kowalski, is very interested in that interpretation. He mentioned something about the Fair Housing Act and federal lawsuits. I think he said the damages usually start in the six figures." The color drained from her face. She looked at the letter, then at the house, then at me. "You can't do this," she hissed. "It's tacky." "It's holy," I corrected. "I'm going to fine you," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm going to fine you every single day. I will put a lien on this house. I will take this house, Jack." "You can try," I said. "But just remember, Brenda, you're not just fighting me now. You're fighting God. Or at least Santa." She stared at me for a full 10 seconds. The silence was heavy, broken only by the jaunty 8-bit tune of Jingle Bells coming from the synchronized light controller. Finally, she shoved the letter back at me. "We'll see what the catastrophic insurance policy says about this," she muttered. She marched back to her cart, slammed the plastic door, and peeled out. I watched her go. I took a sip of my cocoa. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. The first battle was won, but I knew the war had just begun. I looked up at the plastic Santa on the roof. "Hope you're ready for the long haul, buddy," I told him. "You're staying up until next Christmas." I didn't know it then, but I had just started the most insane year of my life. I had challenged the HOA, and the HOA was a beast that did not sleep, but neither did the Order of the Everlasting Yule. The adrenaline of that first confrontation with Brenda carried me through January. It was easy to be righteous when the snow was still on the ground, and the rest of the world was just shaking off the holiday hangover. But revolutions, I quickly learned, are not won in the heat of the moment. They are won in the boring, grinding attrition of Tuesday afternoons. By February 1st, the glamour had faded. The snow had melted into a gray, slushy slurry that coated the neighborhood in depression. My lawn, once a pristine white canvas for my light show, was now a patch of dormant brown Bermuda grass. And against that brown grass, the red and green of the decorations looked wrong. They looked like a party guest who had passed out in the bushes and refused to go home. The HOA didn't attack immediately. They went silent. It was a tactical silence. They were regrouping. I knew Brenda was likely in a war room somewhere, probably her beige living room with the plastic-covered furniture, consulting with the HOA's legal counsel. The silence broke on February 3rd. I was working from home, my actual job, not my religious crusade, when a courier van pulled up. A man in a uniform that said D&D Legal Services walked up the driveway, stepping carefully over the extension cords that snaked across the concrete like a nest of vipers. He handed me a thick envelope, tipped his cap, and left without a word. I took it into the kitchen. It was heavy. Inside was a letter from a law firm downtown. Bartholomew, James, and O'Neill. It sounded expensive. Dear Mr. Reynolds, we represent the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association regarding the ongoing violation of Section 14, Paragraph C. I skimmed the legalese. It was standard threatening garbage until I got to page 3. While the association respects the religious freedoms of all residents, we require proof of the validity of the Order of the Everlasting Yule. Please provide the following within 14 days. 1. Articles of Incorporation. 2. A list of recognized holidays. 3. A schedule of worship. 4. Proof of 501c3 status, if applicable. Failure to provide these documents will result in the immediate resumption of fines, retroactive to January 2nd, currently totaling $16,500. $16,000. I felt a cold sweat prickle on my neck. I called Stan immediately. Stan, they want articles of incorporation. They want a schedule of worship. They called my bluff. They didn't call your bluff, Jack, Stan said, his voice calm, amidst the sound of what I assumed was him losing a video game in the background. They're engaging in discovery. This is good. It means they're taking you seriously. It means they're going to bankrupt me. I don't have, articles of incorporation. I have a plastic snowman and a spite problem. Then we make them, Stan said. Come by the office. Bring a 6-pack. We're going to write some scripture. That afternoon, I sat in Stan's office, which smelled faintly of pepperoni and toner fluid. We drafted the bylaws of the order. It was the most creative writing I'd done since college. Okay, Stan said, typing furiously on a keyboard that was missing the F key. Schedule of worship. This is tricky. If you say you worship every day, they'll say it's a nuisance. If you say you worship once a week, they'll say you can turn the lights off the other 6 days. So what do? We make the light the worship, Stan grinned. Listen to this. The order believes that the artificial illumination represents the inner light of the human spirit. The act of energizing the filament is the prayer. To extinguish the light is to extinguish the soul. That's deep, I said, cracking a beer. And total nonsense. It's legally defensible nonsense, Stan corrected. Now, holidays. We need a reason why the stuff is up now. February. Valentine's Day? Too secular. We need something Yule-specific. He paused, staring at the ceiling. Feast of the Winter Endurance. February is the hardest month. The lights are a beacon of hope to get us through the gray. March? The anticipation of the vernal equinox. April? The resurrection of the bulb. You're good at this. I was a theology major for a semester before I discovered tort law paid better, Stan said. He hit print. Take this. File it with the county clerk so it's official public record. Then mail a copy to Brenda's lawyers. And Jack? Yeah? You need to step it up. If they drive by and see those lights flickering or that snowman sagging, They'll argue you're neglecting your shrine. A neglected shrine isn't a church. It's blight. You need to maintain it like it's the Vatican. I drove home with a new sense of purpose. Stan was right. My display was looking sad. The winter winds had been cruel. The inflatable Santa was listing to the left, looking less like a jolly saint and more like he'd had a stroke. The reindeer were knocked over, their plastic legs kicking helplessly at the sky. If this was a church, I was a terrible pastor. I needed help. I needed someone who understood structure. I needed someone who didn't ask questions. I needed Big Mike. It had found Big Mike's number on the side of a beat-up Ford F-350 parked at the gas station a few weeks back. The sign said, Big Mike's Welding and Fabrication. If steel can fix it, we can fix it. I called him the next morning. Mike here. Mike, this is Jack Reynolds over in Whispering Pines. I have a structural issue with a display on my property. Whispering Pines? Mike grunted. I hate that place. Security guard at the gate made me check my tire pressure before he'd let me in last time. Said my truck looked heavy. I'll clear you at the gate, I promised. I need you to secure some statues, and maybe do some roof work. Statues? Like heavy art? Bronze? Marble? Plastic, I said. Hollow plastic. There was a long silence. You want me to weld plastic? No, I want you to build steel cages to hold the plastic. Look, just come out. I'll pay double your hourly rate if you can start today. Money talks. Especially to guys like Mike. 2 hours later, the rumble of a diesel engine shook my windows. I looked out to see a truck that looked like it had survived a literal war rolling up my driveway. It was black, dented, and had a welding rig on the back that looked like a distinct fire hazard. Big Mike hopped out. He was shaped like a refrigerator with a beard. He wore welding leathers and a hat that said, "Does this welder make my butt look big?" He walked up the driveway, his boots thudding heavily. He stopped in front of the nativity scene. He looked at the plastic baby Jesus. He looked at the rebar stakes I had hammered in. He looked at the house. So, Mike said, his voice like gravel in a blender. This is the job. This is the job, I said, walking out to meet him. The wind keeps knocking the wise men over. It's disrespectful. I need them anchored, permanently. Mike walked over to Melchior, the one with the gold. He nudged the plastic figure with his steel-toed boot. It wobbled. You want them anchored, Mike repeated. I want them to survive a tornado, Mike. I want them to be the only thing left standing if a nuke hits this zip code. Mike looked at me. He had intelligent eyes buried under bushy eyebrows. He was assessing me. He was trying to decide if I was crazy or just rich. This about the HOA? He asked. Brenda, I said. The president. Mike nodded slowly. A smile cracked through the beard. I had a job over on Elm Street last year. Lady told me I couldn't park on the street because my truck was aggressive. Was that her? Blonde helmet hair? Looks like she smells bad smells all the time? That's her. Mike spat on the ground, which, I noted with panic, was a violation of Section 8, but I let it slide. I hate her. What's the plan, boss? I claimed religious freedom, I explained, gesturing to the house. This is my church, but they're trying to say it's clutter because it's flimsy. I need it to look permanent. I need it to look like a monument. Mike walked back to his truck. He pulled out a tape measure. All right, here's what we do. We don't just stake them. We build a subframe. I got some half-inch square tubing in the shop. We fabricate a skeleton for each of these little plastic dudes, bolt the skeleton to the concrete driveway. Then we slide the plastic over the steel. Can you do that for Santa on the roof, too? Mike looked up at the roof. The big guy? He's inflatable. Can't put a skeleton inside him. Then we cage him, I said. Or, wait, what if we build a platform? A steel platform bolted to the trusses, so he sits flat even in high wind? I can build a platform, Mike said. I can build a platform that you could land a helicopter on, but I'm gonna have to drill through your shingles. Drill away, Mike. Drill away. The next 3 days were the loudest days in the history of Whispering Pines. The sound of an angle grinder cutting steel is a very specific, piercing shriek. It cuts through double-paned glass. It cuts through noise-canceling headphones. It definitely cuts through the patience of suburban retirees. Mike and his apprentice, a skinny kid named Ratchet, set up a mobile fabrication shop in my driveway. Sparks flew. Arcs of blue welding light flashed like lightning, terrifying the neighborhood dogs. Brenda came by on the second day. She didn't come alone. She brought the Architectural Review Committee, 2 other board members, a frantic-looking man named Gary, and a woman named Linda, who always carried a tape measure. They stood at the end of the driveway, afraid to cross the line of sparks. "Jack!" Brenda screamed over the sound of the grinder. "Jack, cease this immediately!" I was wearing safety goggles and holding a blueprint I had drawn on a napkin. I walked over. "Can't stop, Brenda. Divine work in progress." "You cannot run an industrial welding operation in a residential zone," she yelled. "This is a commercial activity." "Negative," I yelled back. "Mike here is a consecrated artisan of the order. This is church maintenance. You wouldn't stop Michelangelo from painting the ceiling, would you?" "This isn't the Sistine Chapel," Gary shouted, shielding his eyes from a stray spark. "You're welding a steel cage around a plastic reindeer." "It's a reliquary," I corrected, "for the preservation of the Holy Heart." "We're calling the police!" Brenda shrieked. "Call them!" I pointed to the permit Mike had taped to the garage door. "We pulled a county permit for structural reinforcement of decorative facade. It's all legal, baby!" Brenda looked at the permit. She looked at Mike, who had stopped grinding and was now staring at her while holding a 3-foot length of steel pipe like a baseball bat. "Afternoon, ma'am," Mike rumbled. Brenda flinched. This is insane. You are lowering the property value of the entire block." "I think I'm adding value," I said. "Do you know how much steel costs these days? There's $2,000 worth of metal in that nativity scene alone." They left, but not before taking aggressive photos with their phones. By Friday, the work was done. It was imposing. The nativity scene no longer looked like cheap plastic blow molds. Each figure was bolted to a black, powder-coated steel base that was anchored into the concrete of my driveway. You could have hit baby Jesus with a sledgehammer and broken your wrists, but the pièce de résistance was the roof. Mike had constructed a steel catwalk along the peak of my roof. The inflatable Santa was now strapped down with industrial ratchet straps to this frame. He wasn't going anywhere. He looked like he was in bondage, true, but he was secure. Mike wiped his greasy hands on a rag. "That's not going anywhere, Jack. That Santa will outlive us all." "It's beautiful, Mike," I said, handing him a check. "You're a weird guy, Jack," Mike said, climbing into his truck. "But I like your style. Call me if you decide to weaponize the Easter Bunny." The fortress of the North Pole was secure. But as March rolled around, I realized that physical security was only half the battle. The psychological warfare was about to ramp up. The seasons were changing, and nothing highlights the absurdity of Christmas decorations like the blooming of tulips. March 15th. The Ides of March. A day of betrayal. I came home to find my mailbox stuffed. Not with legal threats this time, but with hate mail, anonymous notes from neighbors. "Take it down, jerk. My kids are confused. It's March, you psycho." I felt a pang of guilt. I liked my neighbors mostly. The Johnsons were nice. Mr. Henderson borrowed my lawnmower. Was I the villain? I stood on my lawn, looking at the faded red of Santa's suit against the bright green of the springing oak trees. It did look ugly. Brenda was right about that. It was an eyesore. But then I saw Brenda driving by. She slowed down. She didn't look at the house. She looked at me. And she smiled, a smug, "I know you're breaking" smile. That smile cured my guilt instantly. "Honey," I yelled to my wife as I walked inside. "Where are the Easter eggs?" "In the attic," Sarah yelled back. "Why?" "I have an idea," I said. "Syncretism." "What?" "Syncretism, the blending of religious traditions. If the order is going to survive the spring, it needs to evolve." I went to the attic. I dug out the boxes of plastic Easter eggs. I went back outside. I didn't take the Christmas lights down. I didn't take Santa down. Instead, I hung plastic eggs from the reindeer's antlers. I filled the nativity manger with fake grass and chocolate bunnies. I put a pair of bunny ears on the wise men. It was grotesque. It was a holiday Frankenstein. And it was perfect. The next morning, the police arrived. I was expecting them. Brenda had played her next card, the noise complaint and public nuisance ordinance. It was Saturday morning. I was running the Jingle Bell rock loop, but I had remixed it. I had slowed it down to half speed and overlaid it with bird sounds to make it spring-appropriate. The result was terrifying. It sounded like a Christmas demon waking up from a coma in a swamp. I opened the door to find two officers. Officer Miller, tall, tired, and Officer Davis, short, annoyed. "Sir," Officer Miller said, gesturing to the house, "we have reports of disturbing audio." "Disturbing?" I asked, feigning shock. "Officers, this is the Hymn of the Thaw. It celebrates the melting of the snow." "It sounds like a warped record, sir," Officer Davis said. "And why is Santa Claus holding an Easter basket?" "Theological evolution," I said. "The order embraces the changing of the seasons. Santa is the guardian of the seasons. He brings gifts in winter and eggs in spring." Officer Miller sighed. He looked at his notepad. "Mr. Reynolds, we have 5 calls. People are saying this is a mental health crisis on a lawn." "It's a church, officer," I said, pulling out my binder. I was ready for this. "Here are the articles of incorporation filed with the county. Here are the bylaws. Here is the permit for the steel structures." Officer Miller took the binder. He flipped through it. He looked at the schedule of worship. "Sir," Miller said, looking up, "is this real?" "Is any religion real, officer, until you believe in it?" I asked philosophically. "But legally? Yes, it is very real. And under 18 U.S. Code 247, obstructing religious exercise is a federal crime. I'd hate for the department to get sued for harassing a minority faith." The officers exchanged a look. The "we don't get paid enough for this" look. "Turn the volume down," Miller said, handing back the binder. "If we can hear it from the street, it's a violation. If it's just on your property, it's prayer." "Understood, officer. I will lower the volume of my prayers." They walked back to their cruiser. I saw Brenda standing on her porch 3 houses down, watching with binoculars. I waved. The officers drove over to her house. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw Officer Miller gesturing aggressively with his hands, effectively saying, "Stop calling us!" Brenda threw her hands up and stormed inside. I turned the volume down on the demonic slow-motion jingle bells, round 2 to the order. But as the weather warmed up, a new problem emerged. Nature. Plastic decorations are designed for cold. They are not designed for the humid, baking heat of a southern spring. By May, the tragedy began. The inflatable Santa was fading. His suit was turning a sad shade of salmon pink. The plastic of the candy canes was becoming brittle. One of them shattered when a squirrel jumped on it. And the lawn. Oh God, the lawn. You can't mow under a steel-reinforced nativity scene. The grass around the wise men was growing wild. Weeds were twining up the legs of the camels. It looked like the nativity had been abandoned in a jungle for 50 years. Brenda sent a new fine: failure to maintain landscape. She had me there. The religious exemption covered the display, not the weeds around the display. I needed a solution. I couldn't weed whack around the steel cages without damaging the sacred artifacts. I called Big Mike again. "Mike, I need a landscape solution." "You want me to weld the grass?" Mike asked. "No, I want to pave it." "Pave the lawn?" "Just the display area. I want to pour a concrete slab under the nativity scene. Make it look like a plaza, a holy plaza." "You know, you need a permit for impervious surface coverage," Mike warned. "The county gets sticky about drainage." "I'll handle the county. Can you pour concrete next week?" "Jack, for you? I'll bring the mixer." The plaza of the Yule was poured in mid-May. It was a 10 by 10 slab of concrete right in the middle of my front yard. It looked terrible. It looked like a helipad for elves. But it solved the weed problem. Brenda was furious. She cited me for unauthorized hardscaping. I fought back with accessibility improvements for pilgrims. I argued that the grass was a barrier to entry for disabled members of my congregation who wished to pay respects to the salmon-pink Santa. The HOA board was getting tired. I could see it in their eyes at the monthly Zoom meetings. "Jack," Gary said during the June meeting, "please, just tell us what you want. We'll waive the fines. Just take it down." "I can't," I said, my face solemn on the webcam. "The summer solstice is approaching, the feast of the sun-bleached saint. It's a very high holiday." "There is no such thing!" Brenda screamed, her audio clipping. "You are making a mockery of this community." "Brenda," I said, "your intolerance is noted in the minutes." But the cracks were forming. Not in my resolve, but in my marriage. Sarah was a saint. She had tolerated the lights in January. She had rolled her eyes at the steel cages in February. She had laughed at the Easter eggs in March. But it was June. It was 90 degrees, and we were that house. "Jack," she said one night over dinner, "I can't invite my book club over." "Why not?" "Because we have a concrete slab with melting plastic men in the front yard. It looks like a meth lab, Jack. A festive meth lab." "It's for the principal, Sarah." "The principal is costing us thousands in legal fees." "Stan is giving me the friends and family discount." "Stan is an enabler. Jack, please." "When does it end?" "January 2nd, I said. 1 year. If I take it down now, they win. They'll know they can bully anyone. I'm doing this for every guy who ever wanted to paint his front door red and was told no. I'm doing this for freedom." Sarah sighed. She stabbed a piece of broccoli. "Fine. But if you put a swimsuit on Santa for July, I'm staying at my mother's." I looked down at my plate. I had planned to put a swimsuit on Santa. "I will reconsider the liturgical vestments for the summer season," I muttered. The heat in July was not just hot, it was aggressive. It was a physical weight that pressed down on the subdivision of Whispering Pines, turning the asphalt soft and the tempers brittle. My front yard looked like a surrealist nightmare painted by Salvador Dali, if Dali had a fetish for discount holiday decor. The Plaza of the Yule, my controversial concrete slab, was radiating heat like a pizza oven. Santa was suffering. Despite Big Mike's steel platform, the inflatable fabric was degrading under the UV index of 10. He was losing air pressure in the afternoons, causing him to slump forward in a posture of profound depression, only to perk up again when the sun went down and the air cooled. It was a daily cycle of death and resurrection that I felt was deeply symbolic, though Sarah just called it sad. I had kept my promise to Sarah. No swimsuit on Santa. Instead, I had draped a large American flag over his shoulders like a cape. "It's Patriot Santa," I explained to a neighbor walking his dog. "He's fighting for your rights." The neighbor didn't reply. He just walked faster. But the real heat wasn't coming from the sun. It was coming from the impending HOA quarterly meeting. Brenda had been quiet for weeks. Too quiet. I knew she was plotting. She wasn't sending fines anymore. She was preparing a nuclear strike. The notice arrived via email. Agenda for Q3 meeting: 1. Budget review. 2. Pool maintenance. 3. Proposed bylaw amendment, D. The seasonal integrity clause. I clicked the attachment. Proposed amendment 14.D. Regardless of religious exemption claims, no exterior decoration may remain visible for more than 45 days consecutively. Any decoration displayed beyond this period will be classified as abandoned property and subject to removal by the association at the owner's expense. She was trying to change the law to target me specifically. I called Stan. "Stan, she's changing the bylaws." "I see it," Stan said. "She's trying to close the loophole. It's smart. If she makes it a blanket rule about duration rather than content, she thinks she can skirt the discrimination issue." "Can she?" "Maybe," Stan admitted. "If the vote passes and the rule is applied neutrally to everyone, we might have a harder time in court. We need to stop the vote." "How?" "She controls the board." "You need to win the room, Jack," Stan said. "The board votes, but they are swayed by the residents. If the residents hate the rule more than they hate your lawn, the board will fold. You need to go to that meeting and give the performance of your life." The meeting was held in the community center, a sterile building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was packed. Usually these meetings attracted 5 people, 3 of whom were just there for the free cookies. Tonight, there were 100. The atmosphere was tense. People were whispering. I walked in, wearing my best suit. I had shaved. I looked sane. That was important. I couldn't look like the crazy guy with the lawn. I had to look like the victim of tyranny. Brenda sat at the head table, flanked by Gary and Linda. She looked triumphant. She banged a gavel. "Order!" she shouted. "We have a full agenda!" They rushed through the budget and the pool filters. Everyone was waiting for item 3. "Item 3, Brenda announced, her eyes locking onto mine in the back row. "The seasonal integrity clause. This amendment is designed to preserve the aesthetic value of our homes and prevent long-term eyesores." A murmur of agreement went through the room. I felt the sweat trickle down my back. They were on her side. My house was an eyesore. "I open the floor for comments," Brenda said, smiling. I stood up. "Mr. Reynolds," Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "You have 2 minutes." I walked to the front of the room. I didn't take the podium. I stood in the center of the aisle, facing my neighbors. I saw the Johnsons. I saw Mr. Henderson. I saw the people I had barbecued with, the people whose kids I had bought Girl Scout cookies from. "Neighbors," I began, my voice steady. "I know what you think. You think I'm the guy with the ugly lawn. You think I'm crazy." "You are crazy!" someone shouted from the back. A ripple of laughter. I smiled. "Maybe. It takes a little crazy to keep a plastic Santa up in July. I admit it, it's absurd. It's loud. It's tacky." I paused. I let the silence hang. "But ask yourselves, why is it up?" I looked at Brenda. "It's not up because I love Christmas that much. It's up because on January 2nd, I was fined $500 for being 7 hours late. Not a warning. Not a friendly knock on the door. A fine." I saw a few heads nod. Everyone in this room had received a nasty gram from Brenda at some point. "This amendment," I held up the paper. "It says 45 days. Sounds reasonable, right? But think about what that means. It means if you leave your kid's graduation banner up for 46 days, fine. If you leave your pumpkins out until December 1st, fine. If you have a garden flag that Brenda doesn't like, abandoned property, they can come onto your land and take it." The mood in the room shifted. Seizure of property was a trigger phrase for suburbanites. "This isn't about my Santa," I continued, my voice rising. "This is about control. Today, it's my religious display. Tomorrow, it's your political sign. The next day, it's the color of your curtains. Do we want to live in a community where we are neighbors? Or do we want to live in a police state run by a board that cares more about aesthetic value than human decency?" I pointed at Brenda. "I didn't keep those lights up to annoy you. I kept them up because I refused to be bullied in my own home. And if you vote for this rule, you're handing them the weapon to bully you." I sat down. Silence. Then Mr. Henderson stood up. He was an older guy, a veteran. He leaned on his cane. "He's got a point," Henderson grumbled. "You fined me $50 last month for leaving my garden hose uncoiled. It's a hose, Brenda. I was watering the roses." "And you cited me for my bird feeder being too large," Mrs. Gable shouted. Suddenly, the dam broke. The room erupted into a grievance session. Everyone had a story. The Clutter citation. The wrong mulch color incident of 2023. The trash can visible at 4 p.m. scandal. Brenda banged the gavel. "Order! This is about Mr. Reynolds's lawn." "No, it's about you!" someone yelled. Stan, who had slipped into the back of the room, stood up. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a t-shirt that said, "It's legal until you get caught." "Madam President," Stan projected his voice, "as legal counsel for Mr. Reynolds, I feel obligated to inform the room that if this amendment passes and is to target my client's federally protected religious display, we will not only sue the HOA as an entity, we will name the board members individually in a civil rights conspiracy suit. That means your personal assets could be on the line." The room went dead silent. Gary, the board treasurer, went pale. "Individually?" "Punitive damages," Stan said cheerfully. "Juries hate HOAs." Gary leaned over to Brenda. The microphone caught his whisper. "Brenda, I'm not losing my boat for this. I'm out." "Gary!" Brenda hissed. "I motion to table the amendment," Gary said into the mic, his voice shaking. "Seconded!" Linda shouted immediately. "All in favor?" Gary asked. "Aye!" The entire room roared. Brenda sat there, frozen. Her mouth hung open. She looked at the sea of angry faces, then at me. I gave her a small, polite nod. The amendment died. My Santa lived. August and September passed in a blur of humidity and victory. The heat broke in October, and with the cool air came a new energy. I had survived the summer. The order of the everlasting Yule had proven its endurance. Now we were entering the home stretch. October brought a strange synergy. Halloween. I didn't take down the Christmas stuff. I integrated it. I bought 50 plastic pumpkins. I carved them with faces of pure joy. I placed them around the nativity scene. The harvest of the saints, I told the mailman. I draped fake cobwebs over the reindeer. They looked haunted. It was like the nightmare before Christmas had exploded on my lawn. The neighborhood kids loved it. For the first time, people weren't glaring. They were taking selfies. My house had become a local landmark, the house of all seasons. But the real challenge was the equipment. The lights were failing. A year of continuous operation is hard on cheap LEDs. Strings were burning out. The synchronization box was glitching, causing the lights to strobe erratically like a rave in a dungeon. I had to do maintenance. I spent a weekend in November on a ladder, replacing bulbs. I rewrapped the trees. I touched up the paint on the nutcrackers. Big Mike stopped by. "Still standing, huh?" he grunted, looking at the rust forming on the steel cages. "Still standing, Mike." "You know," he said, scratching his beard, "you made it to November. That's impressive. Most people would have quit when the electric bill hit $500. "It hit $600 in August," I admitted. "The AC plus the floodlights." "You're an idiot," Mike said affectionately. "But you're my hero. Hey, I brought you something." He reached into his truck and pulled out a metal sign he had cut with a plasma torch. It read, "Whispering Pines Cathedral, Estan Jan 2nd. "Weld it to the gate," Mike said. I did. December arrived. The circle was closing. The air was cold again. The frost returned to the grass, covering the scars of the concrete slab. It was December 2nd. 11 months. The mood in the neighborhood had shifted completely. We weren't the pariahs anymore. We were legends. The order of the everlasting Yule had become a meme in the town. People drove from the city to see the house. I had a donation box for a local food bank set up near the nativity scene. We raised $2,000 in a week. Brenda was a ghost. She hadn't been seen patrolling in weeks. Rumor was she was hiding. But I wasn't done. I had one final act. I wanted to make it to January 2nd, the full 365 days. Christmas Eve came. I went all out. I rented a snow machine, a commercial-grade movie snowmaker. I blasted the yard with artificial snow until it looked like a blizzard had hit only my property. I cranked the music. Oh, holy night. I stood on the porch with Sarah. She held a glass of wine. "Well," she said, looking at the spectacle, "you did it. You crazy son of a bitch. You did it." "Not yet," I said. 9 more days." "Jack," she said softly, "look at the street." I looked. The street was lined with cars, but not just strangers. Neighbors. The Johnsons had put their lights up. Mr. Henderson had put a wreath up. But they had added something. Mr. Henderson had a small sign on his lawn. Member of the Order. The Johnsons had a lit-up plastic snowman with a sign. Solidarity. One by one, down the block, people had added extra lights. A little more clutter than usual. A little more chaos. It was a silent protest. A glowing middle finger to the beige tyranny of the HOA. I felt a lump in my throat. They're converting, I whispered. January 2nd, 7:00 a.m., the anniversary. I was awake. I was standing on the porch, wearing the same bathrobe I had worn exactly 1 year ago. I held the original pink citation in my hand. It was crinkled and faded. I waited. The sun rose, the lights were still on. The steel Santa was gleaming in the morning light, battle-scarred but triumphant. At 7:15 a.m., the white golf cart turned the corner. My heart hammered. Was she going to do it? Was she going to find me for a new year? The cart approached. It slowed. But it wasn't Brenda. It was Dave. The guy who lived 3 streets over. Nice guy. Drove a Subaru. Dave pulled up to the driveway. He looked at the house. He looked at the steel cages. He looked at me. He got out of the cart. He walked up the driveway. "Morning, Jack," Dave said. "Morning, Dave. Where's Brenda?" "Brenda resigned," Dave said. "Tuesday night. Cited health reasons. Mostly the health of her ego, I think. The board voted me in as interim president." "Congratulations," I said. "So, are you here to give me the new fine?" Dave looked at the clipboard in his hand. He looked at the citation I was holding. "No," Dave said. "I'm here to give you this." He handed me a letter. Official Notice of Rescission. The Whispering Pines HOA hereby rescinds all fines levied against the property at 124 Maple Drive regarding holiday decoration violations. The board acknowledges the validity of the resident's expression. Furthermore, the board has voted to amend Section 14 to allow for extended seasonal joy at the discretion of the homeowner. I stared at the paper. "We waived the fines, Jack," Dave said. "All of them. The lawyers were costing us a fortune. And honestly, my kid loves your house." "It's over?" I asked. "It's over," Dave smiled. "You won. You beat the HOA." He paused. He looked up at the giant, sun-bleached, steel-strapped Santa on the roof. "So," Dave said, "now that you've won, are you going to take it down?" I looked at the house. It was ugly. The grass was dead under the concrete. The paint was peeling. The wires were a fire hazard. It was a disaster. But it was my disaster. I looked at Dave. I looked at the letter. "Dave," I said, "it's January 2nd. The holiday season is officially over." "Right," Dave said, hopeful. "Which means," I said, a grin spreading across my face, "it's time to start preparing for Valentine's Day. Have you ever seen a Cupid with a 12-foot wingspan made of welded rebar?" Dave's face fell. "I'm kidding," I laughed. I reached over and unplugged the main power cord. The hum of the inflatable fan died. The lights went dark. The silence was sudden and deafening. Santa slowly began to deflate, bowing his head in a final rest. "I'll have it down by the weekend," I promised. Dave let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a year. "Thanks, Jack." He got back in the cart and drove away. I stood there in the quiet morning. I looked at my kingdom of plastic and steel. I had spent thousands of dollars. I had annoyed my wife. I had paved my lawn. I had fought the law. And I had won. I patted the head of the plastic nutcracker next to me. "Good job, soldier," I whispered. "At ease." I turned and walked back into the house. I needed coffee. And then I needed to call Big Mike, because if I was going to take this down, I was going to need a blowtorch.